I'm gonna do the Wirecast virtual.
Where are you seeing it?
Down. Little down. 3 down. And then 2, 1. There.
Here?
So it's work.
Okay.
Try it again,
Ted, say hi.
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Do y'all hear him this time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Drake, say hi.
Hi.
Did y'all hear him this time?
Yes.
Jeff Nolan, say hi.
Hey, everybody.
You still hear him?
Yeah.
Bill Russell. We can skip Bill. No, go ahead, Bill.
You don't want to hear me anyway.
Do y'all hear Bill?
I
Okay,
did.
Peanut Gallery. Our goal is for this to be fun and exciting, but also the last show we had a lot of good quibs where someone says, "Oh, that's wrong. I can't believe they said that." That's exactly what we're looking for from the Peanut Gallery. If we're saying something that you like, say, "You go, you got it." Well, I agree with that.
He wants you to be excited, man.
Call us assholes. Tell us we're wrong. We need those 1-second clips. Oh, good. Monica Mason's in. She was one that was really good at saying, "That's crap." And we want more of that. That's crap. Because that's what we need. Call us out. We can't hear you, but that's good because it allows us on the after party and more importantly, on the behind the scenes. We've already published that on YouTube and that has been also put onto the website. So people can go watch the Just After Party and listen to the show while they're all making fun of us. So the more you guys do that, the more interaction is going to be a better show for the behind the scenes. If you all just sit there and watch, that's great, but it doesn't help creating excitement. And that's part of what that is all that disagreement, all that stuff that Ted brings into the show here. It allows for the after party and or the Peanut Gallery to have that on its own, and it creates for a little bit more excitement.
Yeah. And
so
for long,
hey
up. Joe, wouldn't you say for longer comments, put them in the chat?
So, yeah, longer comments, but those little snippets, that's what we want. That creates that excitement and that conflict. And of course, later on, we're gonna get Ted and teach him how to use comments on YouTube so we can get everyone talking about it and not just the 3 people on the email.
I'm never going to YouTube third time again. I saw myself. I'm never doing it again.
You have to keep going and looking at yourself and listening to yourself, Ted, to immunize yourself.
Yeah. Also, you guys, those who don't want to speak, you can use the reaction buttons on the reactions. They have the number with the thumbs up, heart. You can put those and it'll show up on the screen. So on the reaction buttons, there's a finger, there's a thumb, there's emojis. You can use those too if you don't want to speak. So you can use stuff like that.
Yeah, but speaking is way better because I can use that. I can use their image and the speaking of them. If I don't have that, I can't use it. And we really want to have there's them speaking. Raise your hand is fine and all that, but then I have to use the wide angle shot. So it's better that they jump in and say, "Hey, that's crap. This
is a half hour again, correct?
Yeah, tape will be a half hour.
Tape is half hour.
Which is how long the news used to be when I watched it in the 1950s.
6:30, remember.
6:30 to 6:45 local, 6:45 to 7 o'clock national and world. Yeah. That was the end of it.
Yep.
Okay, before we get started, Bob, could you just repeat the rules as to how long you want us to speak and anything you don't want us to get into?
Just quick.
Well, obviously, no mention of any politician, no mention of what they did or said. We might have some texts flying around tonight. I don't know about 9 o'clock tonight, whether anything's happening, but certainly some Fast and Furious texts might go around. Ted is the master of the email, and because he's a writer and does it so well, I'm getting some wonderful emails that even Joe Boy is reading, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But so, Bill, what we're shooting for is most of your things, try to do it where it's just one thought, and probably 30 seconds is a good time frame because what we're trying to do is when Joe actually has you on the screen with Ted, let's say, just the 2 of y'all. When that happens, Jeff, you can't be heard. So no matter what you said, if you're not faces on the screen with Wirecast, the way it works is you're not being heard, just so you know, if your face on the screen. So when we have y'all like this, remember last time Bill threw out those ridiculous things he couldn't back up, Ted, and you jumped all over his ass? Okay.
I could have backed him up and just couldn't get a word in.
What's your point?
That's the problem, which is the problem with the 30-second soundbite.
No question. No question.
but
But
life in the fast lane.
well, and then what you can though do is there's nothing wrong with you saying to Ted, well, what about this specific thing or whatever? So when you're both on the screen together, when there's only two people on the screen, that's when we want a back and forth. And there's nothing wrong with challenging. Now, one of the things we might have to do sometime is if something can't be decided in the amount of time we have, what Joe Boy would like us to do is bring the discussion out to YouTube itself. So comments are made in YouTube and then answered in YouTube. So if I can imagine that out of this, Ted and Bill, one of them will have something they want to reply with that didn't get talked about. So that's the idea is we can carry the conversation on. All right.
And YouTube will be very good for that purpose because it is a I'm the moderator of it, so I'll make sure nothing really bad or happens on it, but it'll create a lot more interest in the show. Especially with Ted's writing skills. He's an amazing writer. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to rock and roll. I'm going to mute us from the Zoom meeting. So by Zoom meeting, you get to watch it, and we leave you in the wonderful hands of Dawn. And we will not be able to hear whatever you guys are saying for at least another 30 minutes. Okay, they are zoomed out. Audio timers are all reset. Video timers are set.
All right, guys.
Okay, setting
I
up.
just realized Ted put his name as Rachel Maddow.
Yeah.
He did put his name as Rachel. Yes, I know.
That was great. That was great.
But it won't be on the show that way. I won't put that on there. I thought about it.
She went to high school about 10 miles from me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, setting audio. In 5,
She's got a long
4,
neck, that's for sure.
3.
He's starting. Everybody excited for tonight?
Welcome to the Third Side Convo with your host, Bob Phipps. Your panelists today are Jeff Nolan, Ted Johnson, Bill Russell, and Drake Pearson. And now, your host, Bob Phipps.
Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're going to do our show on media bias, which I believe actually exists on all political spectrums. This show has gotten me to recognize that. I've kind of known it for a while, which is why I'm getting all these wonderful people together, even though they have different ideological beliefs, all right? You know, believe it or not, when I was growing up, we trusted the news, and everybody listened to the same people. This was really weird. Now, there were only 3 stations, so I guess they couldn't afford to be biased, okay? Now, tonight, is there something we can do about that? It's not the same scenario. You know, 24-hour news channels, all of those things affect it. Now, what I find is the most of the discussions that people have these days about politics are something about our horrible political candidates and something they did or said. Now, that's not quite the conversation I'm looking for. I want to talk about ideas. So can we admit to bias on our own side? And can we possibly find and learn about websites that maybe aren't so nuts? You know, now it certainly does take a lot more work than it did back in the day, sitting down at 6:30 every evening, where the entire family would be watching the evening news with Walter Cronkite, and he would close every segment with the statement, "And that's the way it is." You know, believe it or not, Joe Boy, my producer, is even starting to question whether or not the right is always correct. As he said earlier this week, am I missing something? That's what this show does. Now, Joe's an especially tough case because I want y'all to realize it's taken me over 5 years to get him to realize that he is not seeing all that he needs to make the right decisions. So let's get started. And right after the break, we're going to get back and we're going to start and talk about media bias. And that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't.
Everybody, that's the way it is. Remember that one. If you're over,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah. All with the great shows Lost in Space.
He did a good job on the moon landing too, by the way.
Yeah. We got some young ladies over here. Monica's too young to remember that.
Really? I'm 51. I'm not that young.
Oh, really?
That's
Well, you don't look 51.
the plan.
I'm 77. Will you tell me I don't look 77?
You do not look 77.
Look 78. No.
My wife says 95, but that's all right.
I'll get out.
The website again is bcairboats.com.
I mean, back again.
Who is that?
All right, here we are. Now let's first kind of go around and see what everybody sees as the political bias and what's the issues and possibly even what we ought to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start with Ted. Ted, give me your opening thoughts.
Well, I think there is bias and it's all over the place. I think they have to. It's called niche marketing. You got to find the tribe that buys your product.
Right.
And cater to them. And it MSNBC to Fox to One American News, they are looking at it. Now, here's something that many people don't realize, and Bob mentioned it earlier, that there was 3 major networks and they came on at roughly the same time. You know, Cronkite averaged about 30 million people a night watching his show. On big shows, he got to 45 to 50 million. Fox News, the most popular cable news network, averages 2 million in prime time. So that's what, 28 million less, yet it's so influential. So I think the impact on the cable is overemphasized. There's not as much influence throughout, only to the active listeners.
Yeah, but can we trust them? Drake, what's your thoughts on media bias to start?
I agree with Ted right off the bat. I agree with him.
Wow.
There is way too much bias on
Agreement.
all sides, everywhere. And it's really just everybody is trying to get that money. That's really what it comes down to. And it's really obvious. That's the thing. You know what it's like? It's kind of like watching, you guys ever watch wrestling, like WWE? You guys remember that?
Yeah, that's
You had
real.
the good guys, you had the bad guys.
It's real, right? That's what we're watching on TV.
Yeah, I was reading today that the problem with the bias is just when they don't admit that they have a bias. Jeff, well, yeah, because one of the channels even has what? Fair and Balanced, right, Jeff?
Mr. Peter.
Yeah, which is of course
Used to.
some sort of sick joke. And I mean, of all the on cable television, there's only one of those outlets that admitted bias and lying and did $1 billion settlement. There's only one of them. And,
Doesn't even have the coolest look.
They were not adjudicated like that. They admitted it, and they paid the money out, $1 billion. I mean, is there anything else to discuss? Shut it down. It's like that. It's admitted.
Yeah, but you're not saying that the other ones aren't biased either. They just haven't paid off $1 billion settlement yet.
No, I'm saying that there's, you know, there are levels of bias. There's propaganda at the absolute apex of it, and there's, well, you know, certain of our opinion shows have a skew.
Yeah.
And you know, having a skew is not necessarily a good thing either. I'm not defending that, but there's a difference from outright lying. And you know, I think it's telling that very recently, just a few days ago, I believe it was One American News. It might have been Newsmax, but it was one of those two sort of tertiary networks. One of them had, you know, some kind of right-wing talking heads on talking about electoral stuff. And they had a chyron on the bottom that said, Newsmax acknowledges that the 2020 election was fair and final. They had it on a giant chyron on the bottom while these two people were talking. It might as well have just said, please don't sue us. Please don't sue us.
Well, that could be. They've got to take that into account now, obviously. Bill,
yeah, you can't
finish
lie.
up our what
Gary,
we
what do you
should
think
talk
about that
today, and what do you think about the bias?
Well, I think the whole
Gary,
concept
what
of
do you think
unbiased
about that?
reporting is really a fallacy, and it really came about in a historical perspective during the golden age of television, when you only had the 3 networks and they were kind of forced to be balanced. But when you go back to the days of old, like back in the days when Ted first started writing, most newspapers adopted a party name, like you had the Tribune Democrat, the Tribune Republican, and the views of the papers
Hey, David, are they
reflected the
making good
views
points or
of
not?
the
What
parties
do
they
you think?
were affiliated with.
Publisher.
So
what's
you know, they
being,
were honest about it.
omitted
I
in
say
my
we just
opinion is
embrace
there's a difference
the,
between journalism,
embrace
which
that
is what
perspective
Walter
that they come
Cronkite
from.
was, and Tom
And the
Brokaw
difference
was
is, and you know,
journalists.
in defense of
These
one
people are
network
not
that calls
journalists.
itself fair and
They're
balanced,
simply providing
when
their
you
opinion.
discern and you differentiate between their news reporting and their opinion reporting, they're very, very clear that their opinion reporting does come from a conservative perspective.
Right.
But the news reporting
Right.
is a lot more balanced, and they do include the other
Should be
uh,
balanced.
other
Should be.
points of view.
Should be.
And I'd like to come back to the other point on that $1 billion settlement for that one, because that involves a whole nother can of worms called lawfare.
Mr. Peter, what do you got to say about
later.
that, Mr. Peter?
All right, cool. Well, all right, let's start. Ted, what should we
You can
do
speak,
about
Peter.
this? We're recognizing the fact that there's bias out there, that it's all over the place. Well, actually, let me ask you, which sites do you see are actually the close to being balanced?
You know, it's so strange now because of the lack of
You
newspapers,
think about that,
which is
Peter?
where you got most of your local news, and the
I
and the
believe
like I
everything
said,
I
the
see
niche
on TV.
marketing that the cable news people provide. So, and even the local television news does very little general interest, political or cultural news that fits to your local thing. So the problem is basically money. Now, they have to make a profit to do that. I worked for a newspaper where the publisher was not a very good newspaper person, but he was a business person. And, you know, it is a business. You got to stay in business to print. That's how my stories got in, because he was a good businessman. So I think you got to take that element out of it, the quest for profit and an overall desire by everyone to be, you know, on the up and up. Or at least come across and say this: we are
All about the money.
whatever, a pro-Democrat or
Possible, I guess I was asking Drake. Is it possible for there ever to be a balanced media source again?
Yeah.
Not a chance. Not even. Don't even think about it. No, because I don't even know if there really was. I don't know. I wasn't around in your guys' time. This is a dinosaur age, right? So you guys keep saying when there were 3 networks and everything was biased. I don't recall that because I was not born yet. But I'll say this: ever since I can remember, there's always been some sort of bias on television and newspapers, and even if it wasn't about left or right, there was always some slant for like some calamity, something bad happening, to get your juices going. The same thing, we see the same thing happening on social media today. TikTok, their whole business model is to show you something that might upset you so that you'll stay longer. It's the same business model exactly that the news media still uses and has used for decades.
Drake, you're absolutely right. If you look at the newspapers in Chicago, in the 1920s, there was 9 or 10 newspapers that hit the street. So they're totally competing, and sometimes have contradictory headlines, all reflective of the publisher's political or cultural outlook. You're absolutely right.
I think that we have to define what we consider bias and balance, because I am firmly of the belief that not all opinions are valid. Some are stupid. Some are objectively untrue.
Hey, Jeff, let's start out with that in our next segment. But I think Joe Boy's told me that the sponsors need to go get a commercial in there. And we'll be right back. And we're going to start out with that, Jeff, because that's a good point. Be right back.
I did not realize Jeff Nolan was sitting up in there. I know that dude. That's an amazing musician right there.
Right.
I never thought I would say this, having lived in the UK for several years on assignment, but as biased as the BBC has traditionally been, they're a better resource than Fox or CNBC, or sorry, Fox or MSNBC or CNN. You actually get a fairly, relatively speaking, objective view of world events out of them.
Wow.
So,
Now it's
always
time
very.
Steve, now it's time for Peter to chime in, who happens to currently be in the UK.
Peter, what do you got to say?
Where's Peter?
I was going to say, sorry, that you used to get unbalanced views on the BBC.
Yeah.
It has ethically, morally, or anything else that is shall we
All
say,
right,
it
Jeff
is a
kind of
great
set the tone
disappointment
for the
in
next
recent years.
segment here. Jeff, go on and just
Better than what
briefly
we're
say
getting.
what you said before, that there's something we shouldn't see,
Yeah.
or what? What is it?
Well, I think that you know, we've polarized to a degree to where we consider the only sort of fairness or balance or lack of bias is if everybody's opinion gets equal time and given equal gravity. And that's just ridiculous because for us to entertain idiocy or grifting or just outright
misinformation
fallacy
or disinformation. I
under
agree
the
with
auspice of being
that.
fair is
Absolutely.
it dumbs everybody down. I think despite us being on this panel ostensibly left or right or whatever, I bet you the four of us agree about way more stuff than we disagree about. And it to take these things and turn them into profit generators. Drake just made the TikTok comparison a minute ago, and I thought that was really astute. Because once you start, once news divisions stopped being loss leaders and started being,
you guys can use the reaction buttons to put thumbs
combine
up
that with
and
the
stuff,
advent
so
of a 24-hour news cycle,
play with those buttons.
it all became about
The reaction.
the
at the
more we
bottom
can
of
get
your-
you pissed off, the more we can get you outraged, the more you know, how often have you seen a headline that said, you know, Ted eviscerates Bob Phipps. He absolutely pulverized him.
Yeah, we've got that, and we've got that on tape, Jeff. But you know, I was reading a poll today, and it looked like a fairly balanced poll, and they talked about the fact that the country is at large actually does believe they'd like to hear both sides of every issue. It's like 82% of the country at large wanted to hear both sides, but only 50% of the journalists thought that they should tell both sides. Bill, can you understand that one?
Yeah, well, and this is where we get into the issue of who makes a decision as to what gets to be heard. Every news station has a right to put their story out there.
Yeah.
The decision maker should not be somebody who's decided that your opinion is stupid and shouldn't be heard, but rather let the people who are watching and consumers of it decide. They
don't have the brain power to do so. That is the problem.
We're not talking flat earth. Let's talk about something. But the point is, you're talking about censorship.
No.
What you're talking about, Jeff, is censorship and silencing. And when you get into climate change, the whole climate change debate, there is room where this is not a settled science. There are many, many very distinguished scientists who know what the heck they're talking about, who do not buy into the whole concept of climate change. One is Professor Emeritus at MIT University on climate and weather.
No.
The other was the founder of the Weather Channel, Bob Coleman. Who
what do you think about that, Gary?
Eviscerated the whole concept of man-made climate change.
Yes.
But yet you never hear that story. And we have folks on the left claiming that to put out and challenge man-made climate change is a disinformation program, and it is not. It is a program, and it is a viewpoint that is based in science and takes into account the science of climate change when you want to do it. But
I don't want to debate climate change, but I had a
James
physics
Harville
of the
comes to mind
atmosphere
immediately.
professor
I
who
was
would
bringing it
tell you
up.
not a scientist.
But he's a political leader who's saying that they should be censoring and silencing those who argue against man-made climate change.
And I think most of the naturalists believe. I think your man from MIT is in the vast minority.
It's science, right?
But we'll probably,
hey,
Ted, let's pull the climate change off the camera, and certainly we can go after that. I think, but what it does show, though, what I read is that the left is more likely to say that the right shouldn't hear this, and the right, does that seem to happen, Ted? I mean, it seems like, because Jeff, you're all for that, right? That there's stupid ideas out there.
A lot of people.
It shouldn't be said.
I don't think that.
Let me hear from Drake real quick. Let's get Drake into this one. Drake,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, tag me in. Thanks.
You heard what we're saying. Now, can you make some sense out of what we said?
So I disagree with Jeff on this one. But what I'm saying is, yeah, I want to hear the other side of the flat earth argument. That I want to hear some idiots. I want to let it air out so I can make my decision of like, oh, that guy's clearly an idiot. All right, cool. Next, I can go on to the next thing. I want to hear the other side of the argument.
Yeah, but Drake, you're an intelligent guy. What about the stupid person who's exposed to that?
And that brings us to another conversation entirely, which is education, which I can go for days about. But
Oh,
yeah, we do
I'm a
need to do
teacher.
something
Let's
about
go.
the education in this country because we can't just constantly be limiting what people can hear or not because they're too dumb to make actual good decisions for themselves.
Because we don't teach critical thinking.
Yeah, that's kind of a form of bias, I guess, by not letting other things be out. I guess that's the probably the right's complaint sometimes.
I'm going to weigh in real quick. We all remember Rush Limbaugh and the fairness doctrine that got eliminated.
I think somebody froze.
Rant and rave about all the liberal faults in the world, on and on and on. He never had, by law, he did not have to have an opposing viewpoint. Did not have to have guests that would counteract him. So back to Jeff's point is the fact that the reason, an argument or a discourse can lead to education. When you have a one-sided thing coming at you all the time, there's no real learning. It's just that whether or not you believe the guy or not. So there's no real education as much as understanding of one person's point of view. And it goes back to that basically. And so all Rush Limbaugh's and Jesse Waters and Hannity and Rachel and all of them, they find their base, cater to them, and cash your checks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're just there for the money.
Jeff, what were you gonna say?
It's a grift. And it's the oldest trick in the book. And it just so happens, and I really hope I don't, upset anybody when I say this more than I should, but it's easier to grift the right wing. It just is. And you can pick their pockets a lot easier by keeping them pissed off about things that really kind of don't matter. And like cultural things that are so small and minor, you can blow them up into huge things and get checks. And that's not true for
Drake, are you going to respond to that one? You gonna let him just say that without a challenge?
I don't know what to say that because easier to what are you measuring this metric on? Is it the amount of money? Because if it's the amount of money, then probably it's because the right has money and a lot of the left just doesn't.
Well, I would argue the exact
I thought we weren't going to be doing this.
Look at the population. It's mostly younger people
Open the bottle,
on
right?
the left and rather on the right, right?
Greg, the higher amount of uneducated or not college educated voters swing heavily right. And that's where Jeff's talking about is that they're easier to be outraged by a certain.
Say not college educated, but does that mean uneducated? Because
no, not necessarily, but by and large, is that demographic, it's definitely more right wing.
I have degrees, and I
disagree with me.
I've met many people on the left who were
it's
ignorant.
Any of us right now could come up with a few T-shirt slogans that are disparaging to the left wing and offensive, and we could go sell them at rallies and sell.
I think
for sure. You can do that very easy.
The left has done
what do you guys think about that?
Decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
When you talk
or
about,
you can do speak up.
everything from bumper stickers of world peace, in this war now, endless war.
Yeah, that's really offensive. That world
That's
peace.
real. Yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
Except when the KGB funded $2 billion equivalent
of
geostrategic
issues of what makes war and peace, what caused belli, et cetera, et cetera.
War is money, right?
Hey, Bill, now that we've agreed, we're going to have to take a break, but now that we've agreed upon the fact that everybody is agreeing that the bias is everywhere, and the bias kind of happens because the money, it's the only way for them to make money. They've got to form their tribe, as Ted says. Now before we take a break, I want you to realize Joe Boy's just got an outstanding website set up. We've got Facebook, we've got YouTube to subscribe and like, and Joe Boy just set up the thirdsideconvo.com, and it's just brilliant. All of y'all are prominent on this, and this is wonderful. So we're going to be right back with our break for our wrap up. Be right back.
Corona Cigar Company is your one-stop shop for all your cigars.
I worked radio for 14 years. I understand how media works. I mean, we all understand it. Anybody who has half a brain and has had a half decent education understands the bias and that this is a business. At the end of the day, it's a business. And the problem is all the people Bob named in his email, those people are not journalists. News is journalism. These people are giving commentary
Exactly.
It's not the same thing.
Exactly.
What do you think about that, David?
100% agree.
By the
Gary?
way, I don't want to get off into a specific issue, but I will tell you, my physics of the atmosphere professor in college in the 1960s tried to dissuade us from worrying about the Earth freezing over and the polar ice cap descending over North
All
America.
right, now we're going to try to bring the Uber discourse method of bringing everybody together. All right. So what should we be doing? Now, I am serious about it. Joe Boyd literally said 2 days ago to me, we get together every Tuesday night to kind of think about the show. And he said, I'm not sure I'm hearing everything. I think, Ted, you're starting to make a difference one person at a time. Okay. And I mean that seriously. So what I want you to do, is now what we're going to be is we're going to be on an hourglass. So we're going to go around 30 seconds at a time, try to keep it to 30 seconds.
Show, you guys.
I want you to throw out some ideas of what should we be doing so we all can learn better. All right. I mean, even Jeff and Ted, y'all don't know everything, do you? There you go. Exactly. And I know that Bill and Drake don't. I mean, they've already been slammed a couple of times. All right. So here we go. We're going to start with the hourglass. We're going to start with Ted. What can we do as a country?
I think everybody has to make it a part to peruse the spectrum of news that's available and get an idea what the other side is saying. I do it. I switch from Fox to One American, to Rachel, to CNN. I go all over, and the locals, just to get an idea of what's going on.
It's somewhere in the middle.
And it shows. It shows. Drake, what's your suggestions?
I say turn off the news. Stop watching. It's all bogus. It's all BS. But the solution is within our education system. We need to do a much better job of educating our populace so that we can actually go and look at sources ourselves, go read information, go actually see what's happening out there, and not just take our favorite talking head and whatever they say and go with that.
Perfect. Jeff.
Try not to consume any news media that is reliant upon clicks. Know how your news source is making money.
Okay. Okay, Bill.
And most important, I think, is to go beyond the news. Go to the original sources. Go look at some of the things going on. For example, when they say a certain theory has been debunked, go research that theory in depth. Don't read the news. Go read the original documents, whether they be court documents or scientific documents, and read the opinions of people who are in the know and the arguments that are actually being made in court, not what somebody tells you is being made in court or by those scientific documents.
All right, Ted, let me ask you this. So you say that you go on Fox. Is there any other, we'll say closer to the center, intellectual type, right or left that you would recommend us we may not know about?
Well, we talked about balance. There is I think a very well balanced news show. It's on every night. It's available to most, and that's PBS. I find it to be dramatic and fact-based and simplistic and direct.
All right. Bill, you want to respond to that one, but remember what I really want out of you is what do you look at possibly on the other side of your spectrum to get some of your news?
Well, I will peruse the headlines, at least hear what they're saying. And generally what you get is the echo chamber when you turn into the left. So that is a challenge. And that's why I go back and look at original documents, whether it be issues of debunking of issues related to the election, issues related to climate change, or other issues impacting national national issues.
Jeff, do you have a favorite site that actually is fairly reasonable?
I like newspapers. I like newspapers online, and I like newspapers that I have to pay for. So, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. I live in Orlando, Florida, Orlando Sentinel, which is turned into a nightmare, but it's my local paper, so I have to read it. I'm a staunch believer in you should pay for it so that it can pay for actual journalism.
Excellent. Right. Drake, what about you? You got a suggestion?
No. I would say just go talk to people. Like, what news do I need to hear from, I don't know, the major ones, Washington Post, New York Times, or Fox, or any of these? I go talk to people, and if there's something that is really big happening, I'll find out about it. And then I want to hear, from all sides, from actual people, not from what I've been, basically propagandized with.
Well, that's why you like the show so much, Drake. I mean, you do get to talk to reasonable people on every side, right?
I get to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Ted, but is there any literally other website we wouldn't know about? So you're saying PBS is what you like, which I agree with them. They sound so good. I mean, it's just their voices, right? They've got the voice down. I don't quite have it yet.
Well, back to Jeff's point, as opposed to clickbait online, and which you see so much stuff, newspapers, generally speaking, vet their sources, and they get two sources just about in everything as best they can. And that used to be the way. Online, you can get people to say, this is my opinion, and I'm just going to throw it up there.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the discourse has gone. It's just to these crazy, sometimes lone wolf people in their basement making crazy statements.
Yeah, it is amazing how, but everybody has a voice now, and you can choose who to listen to it. Bill, anybody you listen to special, just real quickly?
Well, the one website I go to frequently is freerepublic.com, which it's a group of folks. I mean, yes, the audience tends to be right leaning, but they post articles from all over the world, from multiple sources, from Berlin.
So there's
to
good
London
stuff on
to
there.
US.
They even have their own name,
absolutely.
right, Bill? They're called Freepers.
Yeah, Freepers.
You're a Freeper. Got it. Well, no,
I'm
but
Freeper,
not
yeah.
everything is bad on it. Like you said, it posts other things. Jeff, real quickly, you got 15 seconds. Actually,
The
10.
problem is the source.
But
they're
I'm a big
still
fan of
focused on,
reading
they still have a bias.
from other
And
countries,
maybe
their
a
take on
secondary
American
one.
political news,
Yeah.
whether, and like lots of other countries.
No, that's excellent.
point's
You know,
being
because
made.
one of the things, and we're going
Lots
to
of good
try
points
as
being
the show
made.
moves on, we're going to get more and more panelists that maybe even weren't born in this country, and panelists that have a worldview, because most of the problems that we're going through in this country, guess what, guys? We are not that unique. All right. There are things that other countries are going through before us. We got to learn from them. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going
Gary, you
to
learned
continue
something
this
today.
conversation on the Third Side Convo. And we're going to keep talking about it. We're not going to stop. And I thank you all for appearing today. It was an excellent show. And we will see you next week on the Third Side Convo. Check us out, Facebook, YouTube, and Joe Boy's great website. Thank you, Joe Boy.